Nice. Okay. Hello, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever else we are broadcasting. We are live. Unfortunately, there's a little mix-up last week, so we weren't on last week, but we are back. All sorts of stuff going on. But yes, we are back, and we're going to be talking about screen time. If you have children, they probably are around screens all the time. You're on your phone, they see it, they have tablets, they have all sorts of little things. It's a struggle for myself as well. But let's dive into that a little bit and just kind of touch on that. So, how problematic is screen time? Is it? Do they overblow it? Is it? Oh, maybe we don't talk about it enough. Where's your stance on all this? Because I know where you stand, but where is your stance on all this? And should we be limiting it? Should we be allowing it? Shouldn't these kids know how to use all these iPads and all this other stuff? What are your thoughts?
Well, so much of the talk is about the amount of time on screens, and it also matters the quality of the screen time. There are specific components that matter, whether it's kind of making you mush or not. So I feel that there are so many, just countless studies on the impact of too much screen time, especially the mindless, sort of frivolous kind, on brain development. I mean, there has been a study that's been ongoing since 1975, and it is just night and day difference in level of happiness on those who are addicted to screens versus those who aren't. We know that especially touch screens impact a lot of sensory motor development, visual spatial skills, because you're not using your fingers in the swipe. There's a difference in visual perception because we need to be able to take in the entire environment, and kids get so used to focusing on a smaller screen that they can't see the big picture literally, and it translates into I miss the big picture in life. There has been research coming out that if you only read on screens, it decreases reading comprehension.
I did see that.
Although I'm a fan of audiobooks in the car. It's a great way to spend time. You could, if you have kids who are struggling with the reading fluency, and have them read along as they listen to the book. There's a lot of positive ways to use that, but we're talking about, I think you and I both are realists, and we're also a lot of things in moderation, but also it matters what you're doing. So it's not just about time on the screen.
And when you were talking about kind of the mushy brain kind of viewing, it does that. Now I want to be clear: does that include like video games, or does that exclude it, or is there some sort of difference there?
See, even that depends. If we are just doing shooting zombies on a game, and that's all you're doing, I mean, that decreases impulse control, attention, a lot of your CEO skills of the brain, your executive functions. But there are really four C's you can look at. And one of them is, to answer your question, creativity. Are they creating something new? There are video games where you are creating a new world, where you are actually building. I have seen some of our students' ability with mental rotations, like your internal mind's eye, which translates into keeping an organized desk, understanding where things should go to where systems make sense. That can grow because they're using that on some of these video games where they're creating something new. Are we connecting? Does it connect to something meaningful? I mean, maybe they are watching a movie or doing some sort of activity online where there's social emotional growth happening. They're identifying with the character, and then you pull out the real paper book and you connect the dots, and then you're using context. You're pulling real life into the digital world where it's not an escape. We can see how the two can tether together and support one another. So you've got context, connection. You can also use it to connect as a family. But the creativity, a lot of video games have that. There are times where you can get in there and create new music, whatever it is. So you've got to look at the quality. And I mean, I'm a realist. Screens aren't going anywhere, but it cannot be in the place of being physically active, time with nature. Kids learn a lot of empathy by eye gaze and eye contact. If we have our eyes on the screen, we are not teaching them empathy in the same way we otherwise could.
That's a good point. I like that. Yeah, so not all screen time is bad.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Now,
I think because I think no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think I've seen both sides kind of like play out, and it doesn't tend to be the middle ground. It's like no screen time, or we don't care, and there's never like a blend. Like, well, okay, well, we could do some screen time, and maybe we try to direct more towards productive screen time, right, and encourage
right.
that. But it's just funny because people tend to be on one side of it. It's either all black or all white, and there's no gray. And I'm like, well, you can have screens. It's not like, I mean, you have screens, like they're not going away. You're going to always have something around you at all times. So,
right. I do want to say that the American Pediatric Association, and it's backed by lots of research, unlike some of the developmental things that have changed recently, but backed by a lot of research, is it's really a good idea to have, and you can see that I'm in the middle on this. I'm not an all or nothing, but birth to 2, there is so much brain development happening that any expert I have ever talked to, every research study I've ever read, says you should have no screen time birth to 2, unless it is like FaceTime with grandma, grandpa, a loved one. But then it's that connect-see that we were talking about.
Right.
There are so many things on there though. And then as you get older, it's not like it goes from 0 to 6 hours a day. I don't know that if you're working at a computer, that is productive screen time. You're using critical thinking. There are many engaging activities on screens for kids where maybe they are faced with ethical dilemmas, or a story of someone growing through obstacles. I mean, those are all positive. But birth to 2, be very careful. And then it kind of goes up in 15-minute increments as you get a couple years older, and so on.
I think the cerebellum grows like 175% in that first year, which is astronomical. Right. I mean, and the cerebellum is involved with motor movement, coordination of motor movement, but also speech, thought process, a bunch of other things. So a lot of that foundational neurology is in that first 12 months. And so if you're staring at a screen, you're not using it. And if you don't use it, you lose it, sort of deal. Well, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, that cerebellum, I mean, when you engage your cerebellum, which requires movement, sensory motor stuff, you are 200 million neurons fire off in your brain that help with dopamine production, reward, feel good chemical, serotonin regulation, oxygen, blood flow, glucose. This impacts 75 to 80% of our cognitive functions. So anything that impacts cerebellar development is a big deal.
100%. Yes. Okay. So we kind of talked about, so one of the things that, as we were kind of messaging back and forth, you have some resources. Kind of talk me through like where, if a parent's like, oh, man, I don't know. Okay, I'm confused. Like, I want to do good screen time, but are there resources out there, or are there places I could go, or are there sites I should be exploring, or apps?
Yeah.
Where do we start guiding parents as far as education and things that they can start finding?
The best site I have found for, and they take a very moderate approach. Screens are here to stay, limit it, quality matters, what you're doing with the screens matters. But commonsenseeducation.org is absolutely fantastic. And they have experts come on and talk. They have all kinds of resources you can click on. How do I know if this app is actually educational? All kinds of, is this quality or not? And they won't just say yes or no. Like, you want to use your own judgment on that because you're the parent. But they talk about why they think that, or factors to consider, how to talk to your tweens and teens about mental health impact of screen time. There's a huge link between excessive, frivolous screen time and anxiety, depression in general, but especially in girls. But how to talk to your kids about different facets of it. They have screen time contracts on there, which is really nice. We've, when you create a house rule, or have an entire house contract where we are all abiding by this, and here's why. You sit down and have a family meeting. Everyone has a voice discussing it. Kids don't feel punished. I understand why we're doing this, and mom and dad are doing it also, and that gets a lot of buy-in, but they just have so many good tips. How to talk to
Common Sense what?
commonsenseeducation.org. I am so impressed with that site. Yeah. And they have research on there. It's not just their opinion, on things. So it's really evidence-based site with a lot of very practical tips and tools. It links directly to some really good resources for ways to use screen time in a healthy way.
Good. I just put that in the comments, so you can click on that link later on if you'd like to go to that site. So it's commonsenseeducation.org. Ooh, okay. Make sure I spelled everything correctly. Okay. And so, I had a thought and it's gone. Where'd it go? We've talked about quality over quantity. And we talked about, one of the things I want to talk about was, what about mindless screen time makes it bad, right? Isn't it good to relax and just kind of veg a little bit? Isn't that a good thing? Like, don't we want to decompress sometimes?
In moderation, yes. So I really, a lot of times when certain parameters came out years and years ago, it was just like only this much time on screens. And then you look at that and you're like, I'm on my computer all day at work. And so I already blew past that, that kind of thing. It matters what you're doing. So I really think of those types of, if kids are doing online schooling, that is not screen time in terms of a way that impacts the brain negatively.
Right.
So I think those are more of the mindless hours. I mean, that is sometimes you do need just some downtime and you need to let your mind wander and not be working. So I really think of those limits as being that what's called frivolous, but it's not frivolity to take care of yourself and just relax. Yeah.
TikToks, you can blow through time. It's insane. You're like, I'm only watching 15-second videos, but then like half an hour later, you're like, what did I do with my life? And so, but okay, let's answer this question, because I think at some point in time, we've probably all found ourselves on social media, especially with videos, just laughing and having a good time. But what is it about kind of that short burst of information that makes it so attractive and addictive to kiddos and us, right? So I'm not blaming anybody, but like, what is it about that then, and why should that be a concern? Is it that dopamine hit they're getting, or what is it about kind of these mindless little hits that we're seeing?
Yeah, part of it is the dopamine, because, for example, on video games, they measure it to where the level you're usually playing at on a game matches where you are, and it challenges you a little bit, but then kids feel success. That releases dopamine. They're actually short bursts of attention that are strung together, and then you have the big reward of ding, 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 next level. It's not what happens when you're sitting in school. They don't throw you a parade because you did your spelling test. And so kids, think about a lot of drugs where individuals who are addicted to drugs keep needing a bigger and bigger and bigger hit to get that same feeling. Well, that same thing happens. That's why it's called a digital drug. And I need more and more and more of that huge, good feeling and that dopamine hit. School is not going to match that. Doing chores is not going to match that. And so it's important to really be cultivating intrinsic motivation and not the carrot and stick. But the other thing about, I think a lot for all of us, and this really includes adults probably equally, is our brains have a negative bias. We are wired to have, it is called the negative memory bias or the negativity bias. And because we are wired to make sure we're safe. Our brain's number one job is to make sure we're safe. And so being on the lookout for anything that could be a danger, that's negative, we're naturally on alert for that. But so then if you're and it's just like news, and like, oh, here's, like a train wreck that somebody can't stop watching on the screen, that is reinforcing that negativity bias. And even though it's negative, that feels comfortable to me because I know the world is negative. I mean, it can kind of go that way. And so it also feeds that monster. And we really need to flip the script on being exposed to, when it comes to news. Your tweens and teens, 8-9-year-olds and up, are going to hear about the stories in the world. And so you want to be the one to frame that conversation and open it up to questions and help them feel emotionally and physically safe, but being able to talk through those things. Whereas if it's a younger one, they may not hear those things. But if you are going to watch something, watch it together and then talk about it and screen some stuff goes too far. I mean, we talked about with the recent tragedy, here in Texas. But yeah, there is a negativity bias, and our brains seek out information that confirms what we already think. So we also have this confirmation bias. So that plays in a lot too. And if you have low self-esteem and this is happening, it can make people feel better or worse about their lives. Some people like following the train wreck because maybe I'm not so bad after all. They're not feeling inherent worth within themselves. Others see a fake facade of this super every day they're at Disneyland and in Europe, and I have right. My life is so exciting and shiny and perfect. You're not seeing what's happening behind the scenes. And so some individuals, kids, will lack the perspective to know that's not the entire story. And I'm comparing my true inner self and my struggles with the shiniest version of this person's life, and so that happens also.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch the news because there's no point. It doesn't ever make you feel good. There's no feel good stories on the news. I read the news just to kind of keep up with what's happening in the world, but I have control of what articles I can click. It's at my own pace. Yeah, I don't watch the news because I used to watch the news all the time. I got to keep up. It's so depressing, and you get addicted to hearing the negative, and then you start thinking everything is negative, which is essentially the same thing as everything is positive and their life is wonderful because that's all you see.
Right.
That's not the case. So it's you reaffirm what you think through that own bias. So you're reaffirming your own bias, and then it just doesn't do you any good. It's all negative or all positive, and none of that is reality. And so I stay away from the news because I suggest everybody stay away from the news because it's just terrible.
Yeah. And another thing, if people are in chat rooms a lot and doing that too much, some people have more courage to say things they would never say to someone they know face to face. And then it can be hard to switch gears. We don't want that happening online anyway, but then it can be really hard to switch gears. Kids are you're missing so much of the nonverbal, or I have this safety net between me. So then when I'm in a real life event, that feels overwhelming. It really skews so many of these things. There are healthy ways to create connection, but it matters what the sites are and what the activities are. It's very important to talk to kids about, what's your favorite, depending on what they're into, site, app, who are you following that you're really enjoying right now? And without judgment, not, why do you like that? Tell me about that. What's so intriguing about that? Like genuine interest, or their game. Will you show me how to play it? I'd love to learn. And so that you're kind of keeping an eye on what's going on, but they also don't feel judged. And so then when you're talking about the limits and the things that aren't appropriate, they're going to be more receptive to that. But are there any sites, any chat rooms, any whatever they're into that make you feel uncomfortable or stressed? Do you ever feel pressure to be online in a certain place so that you can keep an eye out and depending on the age, be warning about certain, we need to have conversations about online bullying or cyber stalking, or depending on the age and what's going on. But just keeping an eye on all those things. And, thinking about habits even. What do you think about our screen time habits as a family? Not about your screen time families, about a family. Do you ever feel like we get a little too hung up on screens that it takes away from us and going out into town and doing something fun as a family? Are there any times a day you can think of that we could turn it off? It's not that you're letting them completely make these decisions, but you're talking about as a family, so they don't feel like it's not pointing the finger at them, and they see the whole family kind of making some adjustments just to keep everything in balance.
I like it. Yeah. Should be a family choice, right? Yeah. Kids are paying attention. My daughter knows let's be honest, I do all my work through here too. Like I'm messaging, emailing, calling, whatever I'm doing through here. And if she's talking to me and I'm in the middle of an email, she knows that I'm not fully engaged. So they know. They're smart.
Yeah.
They're real smart. They pick up on stuff like that. Okay. Do you have any other resources as far as topics?
I was actually going to write these down for this show, and I ran out of 105, got here a little faster. But I want to say there's a book called Slaying the Digital Dragon or something like that. Okay. That there are a couple of books on freespirit.com. I haven't mentioned them in a long time that are specifically written for kids about screens. where it kind of guides them through making smarter decisions. It's not saying don't do screens at all, but it being in a much more balanced, productive, way. But Slaying the Digital Dragon, I want to say, is one of them. But if you put in screen time on freespirit.com, and then of course you could get the books anywhere. But that is the publisher. That I like those because they're written in child speak or teen speak,
Yes. Written by Alex Packer. I see it now. I will put Free Spirit up here as well. Okay, awesome. Yeah, Free Spirit. We need to get a sponsorship from them or something, because you mentioned. It's a great resource. So you have those 2 resources. They are available. Again, I think the main thing to take away from this is, screens are not inherently bad, and they can be used for good. And there are things that you can do. Like my daughter loves to color. Like she's both on paper and on the pad. She likes to color. She has different princesses and dragons and unicorns that she likes to color. And for her, that's a lot of fun. So she actually gets to do that, and she gets a little bit more variability, and she's not getting paint all over the place. So that's one of her kind of favorite things to do. And we don't mind that too much, because if you're on a long drive, sometimes it's good for them to be distracted with something to color. But at the same point in time, they can be harmful. And I think probably one of the main concerns that I always have with this is we do know that our neurodevelopmental kiddos generally have a different level of dopamine. And so for them, they can be really attracted to some of that mindless dopamine, high dopamine, going. And it's easy for all of us. So I'm not picking on them in particular. I could very well fall into that same trap. But that is always kind of my concern, especially with neurodevelopmental kiddos with attention and focus, because their parents will be like, I can't get them to focus on anything. But if there's a screen in front of them, they're focusing, but they're just looking for that reward. And so we can find other ways to get those dopamine hits.
Yeah.
Exercise, there's all sorts of stuff that we can do to do that. But I think that's kind of we need to realize that there's 2 ends to this, and we don't want to swing too far in one direction. And also realize that you're human, and that we all make mistakes, and we all can learn and grow and all that fun stuff. So, I think that's probably the more important message that I wanted to get out there today.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, but just a title, the dopamine hit, and also knowing that sensory experience and movement grow brain pathways. They grow brain communication. And so if we are sitting sedentary, is the screen taking the place of these other things? The sedentary lifestyle, it is not a coincidence that is concurrent with the growth in digital use. And I've just gotten a lot of questions about this lately. There's a lot of research showing that screen use since the pandemic started has gone up in kids 17%. And that it was already high. Yeah. And I don't think we need to encourage people to use screens, because that's going to happen. But we're not going to scold people for using screens, but quality matters. Dopamine, sensory motor development, which grows the brain. But commonsenseeducation.org is, I think, the best site I have personally found that covers all kinds of topics on healthy use of screens. It's really great. And just in case any teachers are watching, they have professional resources as well as family resources.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I'll have to check that out more. So, we all use screens. Let's just try to use them in more productive manners. But hey, I play my video games from time to time too. They are fun, and you do need to sometimes veg. So don't be too hard on yourself. We're all learning, growing, and just trying to improve ourselves. Okay, next week. What is next week? The 30th? Yes.
That sounds right.
Yeah, 30th. Okay, perfect. I honestly was thinking it was already the 30th. So next week, we're about, almost 2 weeks away from 4th, correct?
About a week and a half, yeah. It's on a Monday, yeah.
Next week, let's talk about the 4th of July. I love the 4th of July. It's fun. Burgers, brats, fireworks, all sorts of fun stuff. But, I like that stuff. Okay. Doesn't mean everybody likes it. And lots of kids that I know struggle during that time. The noise, the sounds, the different foods, it's hot out. There's a lot going on. The smoke and all the kind of the chemicals that are released with the fireworks. I got my 4th of July shirt on. All fun, all can be fun things, but also can be very stressful, especially with sensory things. So Heather and I were going to talk about that next week and just different things you can do to do that. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it's the older I get, I don't think so, but the older I get, the more I realize the impact that holiday has on me. Just from like the next day you're kind of fatigued, you're tired, and even if you didn't stay out crazy late, you like that sound and the percussion and all the smells and tastes. I mean, it adds up with you. You're a little fatigued and tired. That's normal. But I think I recognize it more now as a parent, as an adult, because I have to notice it in my kids too. And so let's talk about that a little bit next week.
Yeah, I like it.
All right. We were already going to talk about that. So that wasn't an agreement that we already were going to talk about. We already knew what was going on. But make sure you follow those links. I put them up there. Free Spirit's a great website, has many just incredible books up there. And then the commonsenseeducation.org. I'm going to take a look at that. Another great resource. Anything else, Heather, that you want to touch on before we take off?
No, I think this is good.
Yeah. If there's any questions or, you have any concerns, you're like, whatever, please comment, please send us direct messages. But Heather also has another amazing podcast, Tuesdays at 11 a.m.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Hasn't changed. I can still remember it. Do you have one coming up this week?
I do. It's entitled Kids, I've told you 100 times, how to enhance listening and being receptive to feedback. I'm giving the 7 top things that get in the way and how to turn that train around.
All right. Well, guess where I will be next Tuesday at 11? I will be listening to that podcast. I swear, parents, sometimes we're like, I think I've told you that maybe 300 times, but it's all fun. We're all learning. But anyways, make sure you tune into that. Where can they find that podcast?
At The Hidden Churn on Instagram or Facebook, or Brain Balance of the Woodlands, Katy, or Mansfield.
Very good. So make sure you go follow those pages. Tune in. They are recorded, so you can go back onto those pages and see them. They'll still be up. So even if you can't make 11, you can make it another time. So make sure you do that. You can follow me at Dallas Synergy Chiropractic on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok as well. Yep. So we do have one just very prevalent on that one. But go ahead and follow us. And again, like Heather and I are happy to answer questions. So if you have a question for either of us, please shoot us a message. Otherwise, we will be back next week, same time, same channel, all that fun stuff. All right, Heather, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye.